The door that appeared in my bedroom overnight, a normal night, until it wasn't. I've lived in this house for 3 years. I know every creaky floorboard, every shadow that moves when cars pass by outside. I know there's only one door in my bedroom, the one that leads to the hallway. So when I woke up last night and saw a second door on the opposite wall, I thought I was dreaming. I rubbed my eyes, blinked a few times. It was still there. A tall, narrow wooden door with a brass handle. And the worst part, it wasn't there when I went to bed. A door that shouldn't exist. I sat up slowly, my heart pounding. Maybe I was just groggy. Maybe I just never noticed it before. But that was impossible. My bedroom was small. I would have noticed. I hesitated before getting out of bed, inching toward it. There was no gap under the door, just solid darkness. I pressed my ear against it. Silence. I don't know what I expected to hear. Maybe the hum of pipes or the muffled sound of my neighbor's TV. But there was nothing. Like the space beyond wasn't just a room, but a void. Where does it lead? I reached for the handle. It was cold. Not like metal cold, like frozen, like touching something that had never been warm before. I pulled my hand back instinctively. Every nerve in my body screamed, "Don't open it." But I had to know. Slowly, cautiously, I turned the handle. Click. It wasn't locked. I pushed the door open and nearly screamed. The hallway that shouldn't exist. It wasn't another room. It was a hallway. A long, dimly lit hallway. Impossible. There was no space for a hallway there. My bedroom backed up against the outside wall of the house. Beyond this wall, there should have been nothing but air. And yet, the hallway stretched on. The walls were old, covered in peeling floral wallpaper. The floor was wooden, scuffed, covered in dusty footprints. But not mine. Someone had walked this hallway before. My breath came in short gasps. This wasn't right. None of this was right. But something about the footprints, they weren't just going in. Some were coming out. Right toward me. I slammed the door shut, pressed my back against it, heart hammering in my chest. I stayed like that for hours. When the sun finally rose, I forced myself to look again. The door was gone, but it came back. I convinced myself it had been a nightmare, that I'd imagined it. But that night, the door was back, the whispering behind the door. This time, I didn't touch it, didn't even get close. But as I lay in bed, pretending to sleep, I heard it. A whisper, faint, scraping, like someone pressing their lips against the wood. Let me in. I pulled the covers over my head. I didn't sleep. Something stepped through. The next morning, the door was gone again. But something felt different. Like my room wasn't just mine anymore. Like someone had stepped through. I started noticing things. My closet door, sometimes left ajar when I knew I shut it. Small items moved an inch from where I left them. At night, I swore I heard breathing. Not mine. The final night. Last night was the worst. I woke up freezing, and when I opened my eyes, the door was open. Not just there. Open. The hallway stretched into darkness. And in that darkness, something moved. A figure. Tall, thin, standing just outside the threshold. Watching. Then, it stepped forward. The escape I ran. Didn't think. Didn't hesitate. I bolted from my room out of the house. I didn't stop until I was in my car, miles away. I called my landlord. Told him something was wrong with the house. He didn't sound surprised. "You saw the door, didn't you?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "What do you mean?" A long pause. Then he said something that still haunts me. "Whatever you do, don't go back. The house is still there. I never did." I left everything behind, moved across the city. But sometimes late at night, I still dream about that door, about the figure waiting in the dark. And the worst part, I'm afraid it's not just in my dreams. Because sometimes when I wake up, I swear I hear a whisper, right outside my bedroom wall. "Let me in." The cemetery where the dead walk at dawn. Introduction. A town with a dark secret. There's a town hidden deep in the countryside, far from any bustling city. A town so small that most maps don't even bother to mark it. But if you ever pass through, you might notice something strange. The cemetery, St. Hollow's Rest. It's older than the town itself. Some say it was there before the first settlers arrived. And if you stay long enough, you'll hear the stories. Stories about shadows moving between the graves, about figures seen walking among the headstones at dawn, not at night, but in the morning. Because in St. Hollow's Rest, the dead do not walk at midnight, they walk at dawn. The dare when I was a teenager, I had a friend named Cole. Cole was fearless, or at least he thought he was. One evening we were sitting around a bonfire with some friends when the conversation turned to the cemetery. People say if you stand by the iron gates at dawn, one of my friends whispered, you'll see them, walking, like sleepwalkers, but dead. Cole scoffed. Ghost stories, that's all they are. But I could see the way the fire flickered in his eyes, the way he was daring himself to prove us wrong. That's when he turned to me. Come with me, he said, tomorrow morning, before sunrise. I didn't want to, but Cole had this way of making people feel like cowards if they said no. So I agreed. And it was the biggest mistake of my life. The cemetery at dawn. We arrived at St. Hollow's Rest at 4:30 a.m. The sky was still dark, but a faint glow was beginning to creep over the horizon. The cemetery was surrounded by an old, rusting iron fence. The gates were open. That was the first bad sign. They were always supposed to be locked at night. Cole grinned, nudging me. See? Just a normal cemetery. But as we stepped inside, I felt it immediately. Something was wrong. The air was thick, heavy, like the weight of something unseen pressing against my skin. And then we heard it, a soft shuffling, like bare feet against grass, coming from deep inside the cemetery. The first shadow, Cole's flashlight flickered as he swung it around. The beam landed on a grave marker, then another and another. But no people. See? Cole whispered. Nothing. He froze. His flashlight had caught something. A shadow, standing between the headstones. It wasn't moving. But it also wasn't solid. It was translucent, like a person half-formed. The flashlight flickered, and when the light returned, it was closer. The dead wake up. I grabbed Cole's arm. Let's go. But he didn't move. His breathing had changed. Shallow. Panicked. Look, he whispered. I turned my head. There were more of them. Figures rising from the ground, emerging from behind tombstones. Some had faces, some didn't. And they were all walking toward us. Not stumbling, not floating. Just walking. Like something practiced, like something they had done 1,000 times before. A cemetery that doesn't let go. We ran. Or at least we tried. But the cemetery, it felt bigger. The headstones stretched on, rows and rows that hadn't been there before. The gates were gone, vanished. Cole grabbed my wrist. We have to keep moving, he said. But when I turned to look at him, his eyes were wide. His skin was pale, like something had already started pulling him away. The truth about St. Hollow's Rest. There was only one way to survive, one way to escape. You had to make it to the eastern edge of the cemetery before the sun fully rose, because that's when the dead returned to their graves. We ran toward the fading darkness, Cole gasping, my lungs burning. Behind us, I could hear them. Their soft, steady footsteps, no rushing, no panic, like they already knew that we wouldn't make it. Almost too late. The sun began to rise. Cole stumbled, his body hitting the ground with a heavy thud. I turned back and saw them closing in, hands reaching, mouths opening, but no sound. I grabbed Cole, yanking him forward. We were so close. The trees beyond the cemetery fence, just a few more feet. The moment the first ray of sunlight broke over the horizon, the figures stopped. They froze. Then, one by one, they turned back and vanished, as if they had never been there at all. The ones who don't leave. We made it out. But Cole was never the same after that night. He stopped sleeping. Stopped talking about it, until one morning, he was gone, vanished, like he had never been here at all. And when I walked past St. Hollow's Rest weeks later, I saw a new grave, with his name on it. And at dawn, I swear, I saw him standing among them. My reflection doesn't copy my movements. Introduction. The first time I noticed mirrors. We take them for granted. We glance at them every day. When we wake up, when we fix our hair, when we brush our teeth, we assume they're just glass and silver, a simple reflection of ourselves. But what if there's something more? What if there's something else? And what if one day your reflection stops copying you? That's exactly what happened to me. And now I can never look into a mirror the same way again. A strange feeling. It started with a feeling, a strange, creeping sensation every time I looked in the mirror. I couldn't explain it, but something felt off. At first I thought it was just paranoia, maybe I was overtired, maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, but then I noticed it. The delay. When I moved my hand, my reflection moved a fraction of a second too late. Not enough for someone else to notice, but enough for me to see it. At first I laughed it off. Maybe I was imagining things, but then the delays got longer, and I realized it was watching me. The night it moved on its own. I didn't truly panic until the night my reflection moved on its own. I was brushing my teeth before bed, staring at my reflection. I lifted my right hand to rinse my mouth, and in the mirror, my reflection lifted its left hand. My toothbrush fell from my fingers, clattering into the sink. I blinked. Maybe I was just tired? Maybe my brain had scrambled left and right? I hesitated, then slowly lifted my left hand. In the mirror, my reflection lifted its left hand too. I lifted my right hand, and my reflection did nothing. It just stood there, watching me. My blood ran cold. I took a step back, and my reflection smiled. Something was in the mirror. I didn't sleep that night. I covered every mirror in my house with sheets and towels, but I could still feel it, watching, waiting. I tried to ignore it. I tried to tell myself it was stress, exhaustion, anything but what I knew deep down was the truth. But then the whispers started. Late at night, just as I was drifting off to sleep, I'd hear it, a soft, raspy whisper, coming from the covered mirror. It spoke in my voice, it said my name, and worse, it laughed. The reflection wasn't me anymore. A few nights later, I woke up to a sound, a slow, rhythmic tapping. I turned on the light, my heart pounding. The mirror was still covered, but the sheet was moving, like something behind the glass was pressing against it. Then, the tapping turned into scratching. Long, slow, deliberate scratches, like nails running down the glass. I should have run. I should have left the house, but I had to know. I reached forward and, with trembling hands, pulled the sheet down. I gasped, because the reflection in the mirror wasn't me. It wanted to trade places. The thing in the mirror looked like me, but it wasn't. Its eyes were wrong, too dark, too deep, and when I moved, it didn't. It just stared. Then slowly, it raised its hand and placed it against the glass, like it was waiting for me to do the same. I don't know why, but I felt a strange pull, like if I just touched the glass, something would happen. And I almost did it, but then it spoke, in my voice, and it said, "Let me out." The reflection tried to escape. I stumbled backward, my heart racing. I didn't know what to do. And then, the mirror shook. The entire glass surface rippled, like water disturbed by a stone. Then a hand pressed against the glass from the inside. A real hand. It was trying to push through. I screamed and grabbed the sheet, throwing it back over the mirror. The scratching stopped. The whispering stopped. And for the first time in days, I couldn't feel it watching me anymore. Burning the mirror. The next morning, I did the only thing I could think of. I took the mirror outside, and I set it on fire. At first, nothing happened, just flames licking against the frame, the glass reflecting the bright orange glow. But then, a high-pitched, inhuman scream echoed from the mirror. The glass shattered, and the moment it did, a wave of cold air rushed past me, like something had been released, or maybe something had just escaped. The final warning. That was 3 years ago. I haven't owned a mirror since. No bathroom mirrors, no car mirrors, no reflections of any kind. And yet, sometimes, when I walk past a store window or a darkened TV screen, I see something standing a little too still, something that doesn't move when I do. And sometimes, it smiles.